The rain turned the silk of her wedding dress translucent as Delilah Monroe threw herself down the stone steps of St. Catherine's Cathedral, her veil tangled around her wrist like a chain, her heels abandoned somewhere between the altar and the heavy oak doors she'd kicked open with both hands. Behind her, voices erupted in chaos, her mother's shriek, her father's bellowed commands, the confusion of 300 guests who'd come to watch her bind herself to a man she'd met exactly twice, both times across her father's mahogany desk while contracts were signed, and her future was divided like shares in a company. She didn't look back. The street was empty except for a single black carriage, sleek and anachronistic, horses stamping restlessly against the wet pavement. Delilah wrenched the door open and threw herself inside, gasping, soaked, her carefully pinned hair falling in dark ropes down her back. The man sitting across from her didn't flinch. He was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen, and the most terrifying. White hair fell past his shoulders, pristine despite the weather, and his skin held the luminous pallor of moonlight on marble. His eyes were pale gray, almost silver, and they studied her with something between curiosity and amusement. He wore a black coat that belonged to another century, tailored perfectly to shoulders that suggested both elegance and lethal strength. "Drive," he said, his voice carrying through the carriage without needing to rise. The carriage lurched into motion immediately. Delilah pressed herself against the velvet seat, finally allowing herself to breathe. Water dripped from her dress onto the floor, pooling around her bare feet. Her chest heaved with exertion and relief, and the wild, reckless joy of having finally done something entirely for herself. "Thank you," she managed. He inclined his head slightly, a gesture that seemed more court than street. "You appeared to need swift departure." "I did," she laughed, the sound ragged and genuine. "God, I really did." "From?" His tone held nothing but mild interest, as if fleeing brides regularly commandeered his transportation. "A wedding. My wedding. To a man named Richard Sutherland III, who wants a beautiful wife for his political campaigns and someone to stand silently beside him at fundraisers while he gropes his secretary in the coat room." The words tumbled out, bitter and free. "My father arranged it. Contracts signed 6 months ago. I found out 3 months ago. I couldn't." She broke off, looking at her hands. Her engagement ring was gone, torn off somewhere in her flight. The man across from her regarded her with those unsettling pale eyes. "Your family trades in daughters, then?" "My family trades in everything." Delilah met his gaze, suddenly aware of exactly how strange this situation was. The carriage interior was too luxurious, the man too composed, and there was something about the way he held himself that suggested danger wrapped in perfect manners. "Who are you?" "Hadrian Frost." He said it simply, as if the name should mean nothing, but she caught the weight behind it. That's not a complete answer." His mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile, but close. "No, it's not." He shifted, angling himself more comfortably against the seat. "I'm traveling north to attend a summit, a gathering of considerable political delicacy. You've inserted yourself into my journey at an interesting moment. I can get out at the next—" "You misunderstand. I didn't say it was unwelcome." His eyes held hers. "Merely interesting." Something in his voice made her skin prickle with awareness. She should be afraid. She'd thrown herself into a stranger's carriage, was alone with a man who looked at her like he could see through flesh to bone, and yet fear was the furthest thing from what she felt. "Where are you going?" she asked. "North, to a place called Silvermere. The estate is neutral ground, protected by treaties older than your country." He paused. "And you? Where were you going when you ran?" "Anywhere. Nowhere. I didn't think past getting out." Delilah looked down at her ruined dress, the torn lace and mud-stained hem. "I have no money, no phone. My family will be looking for me. They'll—" She stopped, the reality crashing down. Her father had connections everywhere. Richard's family owned half the city's infrastructure. They would find her. Then perhaps north is as good a direction as any. Hadrian's voice was soft, but there was steel beneath it. "I can offer passage, refuge if you require it." "Why would you do that?" "Because you chose to run." He leaned forward slightly, and she could see now that his eyes weren't gray but held hints of ice blue, like winter sky before snow. That takes courage or desperation or both. Either way, it interests me. The carriage rolled through the city streets, leaving behind the cathedral and her family and the life she'd been supposed to live. Delilah pulled her knees to her chest, uncaring that it crumpled the dress further, and watched this strange, beautiful man who'd offered help without asking for anything in return. "What kind of summit?" she asked finally. Hadrian's expression shifted to something more guarded. "The kind where old enemies sit across tables and pretend civility, where treaties are renegotiated and power is redistributed without bloodshed." He glanced toward the rain-streaked window. "Usually without bloodshed." "That sounds like politics." "It is, ancient politics." He looked back at her. "You're not afraid of me." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "Should I be?" "Most people are. Most people didn't just run from their own wedding." Delilah felt something settle in her chest, a strange certainty. "And you haven't hurt me. You could have. You could have thrown me out or ignored me or done 100 other things, but you told your driver to go. You helped me." "Perhaps I'm merely curious." "Then we're both curious." She smiled, and it felt real. "I've never done anything like this before. My whole life has been scheduled, planned, arranged. Schools picked before I was born, friends vetted, clothes selected. Every moment accounted for. And I couldn't. Not the wedding, not him, not anymore." Hadrian was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried unexpected warmth. "Then we'll travel north together and you can discover what it means to choose your own path, even if it's only for a few days." The carriage carried them out of the city as night fell. Delilah dozed fitfully, exhaustion finally claiming her, and when she woke, they were deep in countryside she didn't recognize. Hadrian sat exactly as he had been, unmoving, watching the darkness beyond the windows with patient alertness. "You didn't sleep," she said, her voice rough. "I don't require much rest." She sat up, pushing hair from her face. The dress had dried stiff and uncomfortable against her skin. "How long was I?" 3 hours. We're being followed." He said it calmly, matter of fact. Delilah twisted to look behind them, but saw only empty road and forest. "How do you know?" "I know." Hadrian's hand moved to the window blind, pulling it down with deliberate care. "2 vehicles. They've maintained distance since we left the city limits. Your family moves quickly." Her stomach dropped. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to if they catch up. I can tell them you just gave me a ride, that you didn't know." "Delilah." He said her name for the first time, and it sounded different in his mouth, older somehow. "I agreed to this. I don't make agreements lightly." He leaned forward. "But I need you to understand what you've involved yourself in, what I am. You're not just a man traveling to a summit." "No." His eyes caught the dim interior light and reflected it back, an animal gleam. "I'm a vampire, a very old one. And not just any vampire, I'm a king. My people have territories, courts, laws. We exist alongside humanity, hidden but present. The summit I'm attending is to negotiate peace between my kingdom and another, to prevent a war that would spill into your world as well as mine." Delilah's breath caught. She should laugh, should dismiss it as madness, but she looked at his too pale skin, his absolute stillness, the way he'd sat unmoving for hours without sleep, and knew he was telling the truth. "Vampires are real. Yes, and you're their king. One of several, but yes." Hadrian watched her carefully. "Does this change your desire for refuge?" She thought about it, really thought, about the man, the vampire who'd led her into his carriage without question, who'd offered help without conditions, who was telling her the truth even when a lie would be easier. "No," she said finally, "unless you're planning to kill me." "I'm not." His voice softened. "I haven't fed from an unwilling human in 3 centuries, and I don't intend to start with a fleeing bride who showed remarkable courage in choosing freedom." "Then we keep going north." Delilah settled back against the seat. "And you tell me what happens when my family catches up." "They won't catch us. My driver is faster than they know." Hadrian's expression turned contemplative. "But they'll pursue. Your father will call in favors, use resources, and if they're clever, they'll discover what I am. Humans know of us, some of them, the powerful ones, the dangerous ones. The hunters." "Yes," he said it quietly. The hunters. The carriage picked up speed, horses running faster than should be possible, the countryside blurring past. Delilah felt the change, the shift into something beyond natural, and knew she'd crossed a threshold that had nothing to do with geography. They stopped at an inn just before dawn, a place that felt separate from the world, tucked into forest so deep the sunlight barely penetrated. Hadrian arranged for a room for her, paying with old coins that the innkeeper accepted without comment, and disappeared to wherever vampires went when daylight approached. Delilah bathed for the first time in what felt like years, scrubbing away the remnants of her wedding day. The innkeeper's wife brought her plain clothes, dark trousers, a soft shirt, a warm coat, and took the ruined dress away without asking questions. When Delilah looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Her hair hung loose and free. Her face was bare of the makeup artists had spent 2 hours applying. She looked younger. She looked like herself. She slept deeply and woke to find twilight settling over the forest. Hadrian was waiting in the common room, looking exactly as he had the night before, untouched by time or fatigue. He rose when she descended the stairs, a gesture of old-world courtesy that made her chest tighten strangely. "Better?" he asked. "Much." She accepted the food he'd ordered for her, suddenly ravenous. "Where do you go during the day?" "There are arrangements, safe rooms, protected spaces." He watched her eat with an expression she couldn't quite read. "The sun is less forgiving than legends suggest." "How old are you?" "Old enough to remember when this land was very different, when my kind walked more openly and humans knew to fear the dark." He paused. "I was turned in 1623. I became king in 1789 after the previous ruler fell to hunters during the French Revolution." Delilah set down her fork, processing centuries compressed into sentences. "Do you regret it? Becoming what you are?" "Sometimes." His honesty surprised her. "Immortality sounds magnificent until you've watched everyone you care for age and die, until you've seen empires rise and fall and realize you'll see it happen again and again." He met her eyes. "But I've also seen wonders. I've had time to learn, to grow, to understand the world in ways mortal lifetimes don't allow. So no, not truly." "Why are you telling me this?" She leaned forward. "You could keep secrets. You could stay mysterious and distant. Why be honest?" "Because you were honest with me." Hadrian's voice dropped lower. "Because you ran from a life that would have slowly killed everything genuine in you, and I respect that more than you know, and because—" He stopped, something flickering across his face. "Because? Because I find myself wanting you to know." He said it simply, and the weight of it settled between them like a living thing. The innkeeper interrupted, appearing at Hadrian's shoulder with nervous deference. "My lord, there are men asking questions in the village, about a woman, showing photographs." Delilah's appetite vanished. "My father?" "No." The innkeeper glanced at her apologetically. "These men aren't family. They're professionals. They have equipment, weapons." Hadrian stood smoothly. "How many?" "At least 6 that I've seen, maybe more." The innkeeper twisted his hands. "I've told them nothing, my lord, but they'll search every building by morning." "We leave within the hour." Hadrian turned to Delilah. "Finish eating, quickly. We need to reach Silvermere before they organize properly." The innkeeper bowed and retreated. Delilah forced herself to eat mechanically, her mind racing. "Hadrian, this is insane. They're hunting me like I'm property they need to retrieve." "To them you are." His voice was hard now, edged with anger that wasn't directed at her. "Your father clearly has no intention of accepting your choice, and hiring hunters suggests he knows what I am, which means he has connections in very dark places. Hunters kill vampires. They try." Hadrian moved to the window, looking out at the darkening forest. "Delilah, I need you to understand what's happening. By helping you, by bringing you into my sphere, I've created a situation that could escalate into something catastrophic. If those hunters attack me, if they die in the process, it will be seen as an act of aggression by vampire royalty against humanity's protectors. The summit could collapse. The peace we've maintained for decades could shatter. Then let me go." The words hurt to say, but she forced them out. "I can turn myself in, tell them you were just giving me a ride, that you didn't know—" "No." He turned, and his eyes were blazing silver. You chose to run. You don't undo that choice because the consequences are difficult. And He crossed the room in 2 strides, standing close enough that she could see the inhuman perfection of his features, the way candlelight played across skin that had forgotten mortality centuries ago. I don't return women to men who would cage them, not for peace, not for politics, not for anything. Her heart hammered against her ribs. You barely know me. I know enough. His hand lifted, hovering near her face but not touching. I know you're brave. I know you're desperate for freedom. I know that in a single night, you've shown more genuine spirit than I've encountered in decades of court politics and carefully arranged alliances. He lowered his hand. And I know that I haven't felt this alive in longer than I can remember. Delilah couldn't breathe. What are you saying? That I'm choosing you, consciously, deliberately. Hadrian's voice gentled. If you want my help, you have it. Not for a night, not as a favor, but genuinely. I will take you to Silvermere. I will protect you there, and I will deal with whatever consequences follow. Why? She needed to understand. Why would you risk everything for a human you just met? Because he stopped, and for the first time, she saw uncertainty in his ancient eyes. Because from the moment you threw yourself into my carriage, drenched and desperate and absolutely fearless, I felt something I haven't felt in centuries. Interest, fascination. He paused. The beginning of something that could become much more, if allowed. The confession hung between them, raw and unexpected. Delilah reached out, her hand finding his, and the coolness of his skin against her warmth felt right, somehow balanced. Then we go north, she said. Together. They left within the hour, the carriage racing through darkness while Hadrian's driver pushed the horses beyond normal limits. Delilah sat beside Hadrian now instead of across from him, their shoulders touching, a new understanding settling between them. Tell me about Silvermere, she said. It's a fortress disguised as an estate, built in the 14th century, modified over the years to accommodate both vampire and human guests. The summit is held there every 50 years to renegotiate the boundaries between our world and yours. He glanced at her. It's also one of the most beautiful places you'll ever see. Gothic architecture, grounds that span hundreds of acres, art collected over centuries. Will they accept me there? A human? You're under my protection. They'll accept you or answer to me. His hand found hers in the darkness. But Delilah, I won't lie to you. This will be complicated. There will be other vampire nobles, elder lords who remember when humans were prey, not partners. There will be political maneuvering, and if your family brings hunters to Silvermere's gates, it could turn violent. I'm not afraid, she squeezed his hand. Not anymore. They traveled through the night, stopping only briefly to rest the horses. Hadrian told her stories about the French court before the Revolution, about the night he was turned by a vampire queen who'd seen potential in a minor noble's son, about the centuries of learning to navigate a world that feared and hunted his kind. Delilah shared her own history, smaller in scope but no less meaningful. A childhood of gilded cages and careful supervision. A mother who'd married for money and taught her daughter to do the same. A father who saw her as an asset to be leveraged. The slow suffocation of realizing her entire life had been mapped out with no consideration for what she wanted. I applied to universities, she told him as dawn approached. Secretly, I got into 3, full scholarships. I wanted to study art history, maybe work in a museum. But my father found the acceptance letters. He burned them in front of me and told me that Monroe women didn't work. They married well. Hadrian's hand tightened on hers. He stole your future. He tried to, she looked at him, but I stole it back. They reached Silvermere just as the sun crested the horizon. The estate rose from manicured grounds like something from a Gothic fairy tale, all stone towers and leaded windows, surrounded by forests that seemed to swallow sound. Hadrian's carriage passed through gates that opened silently, operated by guards in old-fashioned uniforms who bowed as they passed. Welcome to neutral ground, Hadrian said quietly. The main house was staggering in its beauty. Inside, floors of polished marble reflected candlelight from chandeliers 3 stories above. Artwork covered every wall, originals by masters Delilah recognized from textbooks. Furniture that belonged in museums sat casually in drawing rooms, and everywhere the sense of age, of power, of secrets kept for centuries. A woman approached as they entered, her white hair coiled in an elaborate style, her pale skin luminous in the dim interior. She was beautiful and terrifying, and the way she moved suggested lethal grace. "Hadrian!" Her voice was cool, assessing. "You're cutting it close. The summit begins at nightfall." Her eyes shifted to Delilah. "And you've brought a guest. Seraphine, this is Delilah Monroe. She's under my protection." Hadrian's tone brooked no argument. "Delilah, Seraphine Lys is the current keeper of Silvermere." Protection. Seraphine circled them slowly, studying Delilah like a predator evaluating prey. How interesting. The vampire king arrives at a delicate summit with a human under formal protection. That will certainly add complexity to the negotiations. "It's not your concern," Hadrian said. "Everything that happens within these walls is my concern." Seraphine stopped in front of Delilah. "Why do you need protection, little human?" Delilah lifted her chin, refusing to show fear. "Because I ran from a wedding to a man I didn't choose, and my family hired hunters to bring me back." Seraphine's eyebrows rose. "Hunters? Coming here?" "Possibly." Hadrian stepped closer to Delilah, a subtle shift that put him between her and Seraphine. "If they follow our trail, you've brought a mortal vampire conflict to neutral ground during a summit." Seraphine's voice was dangerous now. "Are you trying to destroy centuries of careful peace?" "I'm trying to protect someone who deserves protection." Hadrian met her gaze steadily. "If that complicates politics, so be it." The two vampires stared at each other for a long moment, some wordless communication passing between them. Finally, Seraphine laughed, the sound sharp and surprised. "You actually care about her, how unexpected." She waved a hand. "Fine. She may stay. But Hadrian, if hunters breach these grounds, the consequences are yours to manage. I won't have Silvermere turned into a battlefield." "Understood." Seraphine departed in a swirl of dark skirts, leaving them alone in the vast entrance hall. Hadrian exhaled slowly. "She's terrifying," Delilah said. "She's one of the oldest vampires in existence, and surprisingly reasonable, all things considered." He turned to her. "I need to prepare for the summit. You'll be shown to rooms given anything you need. Stay within the main house and don't go outside without an escort." "Because of hunters?" "Because there are vampires here who don't share my views on humans. Some still remember when your kind were food and servants, nothing more." His hand cupped her face gently. "I won't let anything happen to you, but please be careful." "I will." She leaned into his touch, marveling at how quickly this had become natural. "Hadrian, thank you for all of this. Thank me when it's over and you're safe." He smiled, and it transformed his face from beautiful to devastating. "Now go. Rest. I'll find you after the first session ends." A servant appeared, another vampire, younger looking but still carrying that otherworldly stillness, and led Delilah through corridors lined with tapestries and portraits of people long dead. The room she was given was larger than her entire apartment back home, furnished in dark woods and rich fabrics, with windows that overlooked Silvermere's grounds. She bathed again, luxuriating in hot water and expensive soaps, then dressed in clothes that had been laid out for her, simple but well-made, fitting perfectly, despite no one having taken her measurements. Vampire magic, she supposed, or just centuries of practice in hospitality. Sleep claimed her as soon as she lay down, exhaustion from 2 nights of running finally catching up. She woke to knocking at the door and opened it to find a young woman human, judging by the warmth in her skin, carrying a tray of food. "Miss Monroe, I'm Clara. I've been assigned to assist you during your stay." She set the tray on a small table. "Lord Frost sent word that he'll be occupied until midnight, but wanted to ensure you had everything you needed." Delilah accepted the food gratefully. "How long have you worked here?" 3 years, Clara smiled. "Silvermere employs humans and vampires both. It's part of what makes it neutral ground. We're paid well, treated fairly, and protected by treaties that even the most powerful vampires honor." "You're not afraid of them?" "Of vampires?" Clara considered. "Some of them, certainly. But Lord Frost, he's one of the good ones. Fair, honorable. He's never fed from anyone here without explicit consent and compensation." She paused. "You're safe with him, if that's what you're asking." "I wasn't. But thank you." Delilah picked at the food. Have there been any disturbances? Anyone looking for me? Clara's expression shifted. There are men at the gates. They arrived an hour ago claiming to be family searching for a lost relative. Seraphine denied them entry, but they haven't left. They're camped outside the estate boundaries. Delilah's appetite disappeared. How many? At least 10. And they have equipment, weapons. Clara's voice dropped. I've seen hunters before. These men have that look. I'm sorry. Delilah pushed the tray away. I didn't mean to bring danger here. You didn't bring it. Your family did. Clara touched her shoulder gently. Lord Frost knows what he's doing. Trust him. After Clara left, Delilah paced the room, restless and anxious. The sun was setting, painting the grounds in shades of gold and crimson. She could see the gates from her window, could make out the shapes of vehicles and men waiting outside. They'd come for her. Her father had sent hunters to retrieve his wayward daughter, and he didn't care what stood in their way. A knock at the door made her jump. She opened it to find Hadrian, still dressed formally for the summit, his white hair pulled back to reveal the sharp angles of his face. You heard? He said. Clara told me. Delilah stepped back to let him in. Hadrian, this is my fault. I should never have... Stop. He closed the door behind him, crossing the room in quick strides. This isn't your fault. This is your father's arrogance and your fiancé's entitlement. You ran. They should have accepted it. Instead, they hired killers and followed you to a vampire sanctuary. His hands framed her face. You are not responsible for their choices. What happens now? Now I finish the summit, which thankfully is going more smoothly than expected. The peace will hold. He brushed a thumb across her cheekbone. And then I deal with the hunters. Deal with them how? I speak to them. I explain that you're under the formal protection of a vampire king, which makes you untouchable by treaty law. I give them the chance to leave peacefully. His eyes hardened. If they don't take it, I remove them by force. They'll fight. That's what they do. I know. Hadrian pulled her closer, resting his forehead against hers. I've fought hunters before. I've survived 4 centuries of them. But Delilah, I need you to understand if I kill them, if vampires kill humans on neutral ground during a summit, it could unravel everything. It could start a war that would consume both our worlds. Then give me to them. She hated the words, but forced them out. Let me go. I'll disappear somewhere they won't find me. I'll figure it out. No. The word was absolute. I told you I was choosing you, and I meant it. Not if it's convenient, not if it's easy, always. He kissed her forehead, gentle and reverent. I haven't felt this way about anyone in longer than I can remember. You're brave and genuine, and you ran toward freedom even when you had no idea where it would lead. He stopped, emotion raw in his voice. You're extraordinary, and I won't give you up, not for peace, not for politics, not for anything. Delilah's heart cracked open. She reached up, pulling his mouth down to hers, kissing him with all the fear and hope and desperate affection that had been building since she'd thrown herself into his carriage 2 nights ago. He responded immediately, his arms wrapping around her, lifting her against him as he kissed her back with centuries of loneliness and sudden, fierce joy. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard despite only one of them needing air, Hadrian rested his forehead against hers again. Stay here, he said. Stay safe. I'll handle the hunters. Be careful. Always. He kissed her once more, quick and sweet, then disappeared into the corridor. Delilah stood at the window, watching the gates. An hour passed, then another. Night settled fully over Silvermere, and she saw movement below Hadrian approaching the gates, flanked by other vampires she didn't recognize. The hunters stepped forward to meet them, and even from a distance she could see weapons being drawn. She couldn't hear the conversation, but she could see the posturing, the aggression radiating from the hunters. One of them pointed toward the house, clearly demanding her return. Hadrian shook his head, his body language utterly composed, refusing without hesitation. The lead hunter pulled something from his coat papers, maybe some kind of documentation. Hadrian took them, read them, and handed them back with what looked like a single word. No. The hunter's face contorted with rage. He gestured violently, and his men raised their weapons guns loaded with wooden bullets, crossbows with stakes, things designed specifically to kill vampires. Hadrian didn't move. He stood there, utterly calm, utterly fearless, and said something that made the hunter's face go white. Then chaos erupted. The hunters attacked, weapons firing, but Hadrian and his companions moved like lightning, faster than human eyes could track. Delilah watched, heart in her throat, as Hadrian disarmed 3 men in seconds, moving with a grace that was both beautiful and terrifying. The other vampires fought with similar efficiency, and within minutes, every hunter was on the ground, disarmed, subdued but alive. Hadrian spoke to them. She could see his mouth moving, could see the authority in his stance. Whatever he said made the hunters go still, then, slowly, grudgingly, retreat to their vehicles. They drove away, leaving nothing but empty road and the fading sound of engines. Delilah sagged against the window frame, relief flooding through her. He'd done it. He'd driven them off without killing anyone, without starting the war he'd feared. The door opened behind her. She turned to find Hadrian standing there, perfectly composed despite having just fought a dozen armed men. He crossed to her immediately, gathering her into his arms. "It's done," he said quietly. "They're gone." "What did you tell them?" "That you were under my formal protection, which makes you legally equivalent to vampire nobility. That any attempt to take you by force would be considered an act of war against my entire kingdom." He stroked her hair. "That the papers they carried, documents signed by your father giving them authority to retrieve you, meant nothing here. You're not property. You're not theirs to reclaim." And they just left. I also explained what would happen if they tried to breach Silvermere's grounds, what I would do to them, personally, and what the collective power of every vampire at this summit would do to anyone foolish enough to attack neutral ground. His voice was grim. They understood. Delilah pulled back to look at him. "My father won't stop. He'll find other ways. I know." Hadrian cupped her face. "Which is why I'm offering you more than temporary refuge. Stay with me, Delilah. Not as a guest, not as someone under protection, but as someone He stopped, vulnerable in a way that seemed impossible for someone so powerful. "As someone I'm falling in love with." The world stopped. "What?" "I'm falling in love with you." He said it clearly, certainly. "I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other 2 days. But I've lived long enough to recognize something real when I find it. You're brave and honest, and you chose freedom over comfort. You're everything I didn't know I was looking for." His thumb traced her lower lip. "Stay with me. Let me show you the world. Let me protect you not because you need it, but because I want to. Let me love you the way you deserve." Delilah felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm human. I'll age. I'll die. You'll have to watch me." "I know." His voice was steady. "And I'm choosing it anyway. Choosing you. However long we have. There's another option." She said it quietly, the thought that had been forming since she'd learned what he was. "You could turn me." Hadrian went very still. "Delilah." "I've been thinking about it, about what it would mean." She met his eyes. "I ran from a life that had no future I wanted. But this, being with you, having time to see the world, to learn, to be free, that's a future I could want. That's a future I'd choose. Becoming a vampire isn't simple. It's painful. It's permanent. You'd give up the sun, give up the life you knew. I already gave that up when I ran from the cathedral." She smiled. "And I haven't missed it for a second. Hadrian, I don't want to go back. I don't want to age while you stay frozen. I don't want 50 or 60 years when we could have centuries." She took his hand, pressed it over her heart. "Turn me, make me like you. Let me choose this life the way I chose to run." He stared at her, ancient eyes searching hers for any doubt. "You're certain?" "Completely." "Then yes." He pulled her close, kissing her with a desperation that spoke of centuries of loneliness finally ending. "Yes, I'll turn you. I'll give you eternity. I'll give you everything." They made arrangements over the following days. Hadrian explained the process, the pain of transformation, the weeks of adjustment as her body died and remade itself into something new. He introduced her to other vampires at the summit, let her ask questions, learn about the world she was choosing to join. Delilah met elders who'd lived through millennia, young vampires still learning control, and everything in between. She learned about blood laws and vampire politics, about territories and courts, and the delicate balance between their world and humanity's. And through it all, Hadrian was beside her, patient and protective and utterly devoted. The summit concluded successfully, treaties renewed, peace maintained. The other vampires departed, leaving Silvermere quiet again. Seraphine found Delilah in the library one evening, studying books on vampire history. "You're really going through with it," the ancient vampire said. "I am. Why? You could have a human life. Find a human man who'd love you, grow old naturally." Delilah closed the book. "I could, but I don't want to. I want this. I want him. And I want the freedom to become something more than I was supposed to be." Seraphine studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Hadrian is lucky. In 4 centuries, I've never seen him care about anyone the way he cares about you." She paused. "Be good to him, and let him be good to you." "I will." The transformation happened on a night when the moon was dark, in rooms deep within Silvermere, where the ancient magic that protected the estate ran strongest. Hadrian held her as he bit down, as his venom flooded her system, as her human life drained away and something new began. The pain was excruciating and transcendent. Delilah felt her heart slow, felt her body break down and rebuild itself, felt every cell transform from mortal to immortal. Hadrian stayed with her through all of it, whispering reassurances, holding her when the convulsions came, never leaving her side. When she finally opened her eyes 3 days later, the world was different. Colors were sharper, sounds were clearer. She could hear Hadrian's breathing across the room, could smell the ancient wood of Silvermere's walls, could feel the power thrumming through her new body. "Delilah?" Hadrian appeared beside her, his beautiful face anxious. "How do you feel?" She sat up slowly, marveling at the strength in her limbs, the clarity in her mind. "Like I'm finally awake." She looked at her hands, saw the pale luminescence of her new skin. "Like I'm finally free." He pulled her into his arms, and she could feel his relief, his joy. "Welcome to eternity." They stayed at Silvermere for another month while Delilah learned control, learned to feed safely and ethically, learned to navigate her new nature. Hadrian taught her everything, patient and thorough, and Seraphine added her own knowledge, seeming to approve of the newest addition to vampire society. When they finally left, it was to travel to Hadrian's kingdom, a territory that spanned thousands of miles and included both vampire and human populations, living in careful balance. Delilah met his court, earned the respect of his nobles through her intelligence and her refusal to be intimidated, and slowly carved out her own place in the immortal world. News of her transformation reached her family, and her father sent one final message, a legal document disowning her, cutting her off from the Monroe fortune and name. Delilah read it once, laughed, and burned it. She didn't need their money. She didn't need their approval. She had chosen her own path, and it led somewhere they could never follow. A year after the night she'd run from her own wedding, Delilah and Hadrian stood in a small chapel on the grounds of his estate. No one had arranged this marriage. No contracts had been signed. No families had negotiated terms. This wedding was theirs, and theirs alone. Seraphine officiated, her ancient voice carrying through the small gathering of friends and trusted companions. Delilah wore white again, but this time the dress was her choice, simple and elegant, and nothing like the suffocating creation she'd fled in. Hadrian stood beside her in formal black, his white hair loose around his shoulders, his pale eyes fixed on her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. They spoke their vows in voices that carried centuries and choice and love freely given. They promised eternity, promised partnership, promised to choose each other every day for however long forever lasted. When Hadrian kissed her, Delilah tasted joy and freedom and the future she'd run toward without knowing where it would lead. It had led here, to love, to eternity, to home. Afterward, as they danced under stars that would see them dance for centuries more, Hadrian pulled her close and whispered against her hair, "Thank you for running. Thank you for choosing my carriage. Thank you for choosing me." Delilah smiled, genuinely happy for the first time in her entire human life and all of her immortal one. "Thank you for letting me in. Thank you for protecting me. Thank you for loving me." "Always," he promised, "for eternity." And in a world where vampires were real and love could transcend mortality, that promise meant everything. They built a life together that spanned decades and then centuries, traveling the world that Delilah had never been allowed to see as a human. Hadrian showed her cities older than her former country, introduced her to cultures and languages and wonders she'd only read about. She pursued the education she'd been denied, becoming an expert in art and history, and using her immortality to study things humans could only glimpse. They faced challenges rival vampires who questioned Hadrian's choice to turn a human, hunters who saw them as abominations, political struggles within the vampire world. But they faced everything together, and their bond only deepened with time. Delilah sometimes thought about the woman she'd been, trapped in a wedding dress and desperate for escape. That woman felt like a stranger now, someone from another lifetime. Because she was. The woman Delilah had become was stronger, freer, and infinitely happier. She was a vampire noble, a scholar, a fighter when needed, and the beloved partner of a king who'd chosen her before knowing her, who'd protected her without hesitation, and who'd given her the gift of eternity to discover who she truly was. On the anniversary of the night she'd run a date, they celebrated every year they returned to Silvermere. Seraphine greeted them warmly, and they walked the grounds where Delilah had first understood what her future could hold. "Do you regret it?" Hadrian asked as they stood at the gates where he'd once faced down hunters for her sake. "Giving up your human life?" Delilah turned to him, this beautiful, dangerous, devoted man who'd become her everything. "I've never regretted a single moment since I ran from that cathedral. Every choice I've made since then led me to you, to this life, to freedom I never dreamed possible." She kissed him softly. "I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. Even the part where you threw yourself into a stranger's carriage? Especially that part," she grinned. "Best decision I ever made." Hadrian laughed, the sound rich and genuine, and pulled her close. Around them, Silvermere stood eternal, a monument to peace and possibility. Above them, stars wheeled in patterns they'd watch for centuries to come. And between them, love burned bright and certain, a choice renewed every day, every year, every decade of their immortal lives. Delilah had run from a wedding that would have destroyed her. She'd run straight into a love that would last forever. And she had never looked back.